Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Chai Together. I am your host and founder, Pratibha Day. Today, you are tuning in for your cup of courage, hope, and imagination. And here are our Chai Together cups that I designed myself. Today, we are going to use Miss Terri Kozlowski's story about courage, hope, and imagination and share her journey with you and see what value we can bring to you today. So how are you feeling, Miss Terri?
I'm feeling great this morning.
I like it. I like it a lot. And let everyone know where you're tuning in from.
I'm in Woodstock, Georgia. It's a suburb of Atlanta.
Wow. How long have you been living there?
I've been living here since 2014. But I've been in the Atlanta area since 2005.
Wow. What do you do for work?
I am part-time because COVID really changed my life for the better in some ways. I went from being full-time 50 hours a week down to 24 hours a week. And I'm happy about that. So I am the vice president of a medical device company out of Atlanta here. And I started out as a floater and became the vice president of operations. So when you put your intuitiveness and your skill set into place, and especially around people who see your potential, you can really grow into something that you never thought you could be.
Wow, I really like that. You said a whole word. Which medical device is this, may I ask?
This is called the AccuSpinal system. It is a spinal decompression device that helps heal your back from herniated discs or disc degenerative disease, several other conditions, cervical or lumbar spine. We have 1,800 locations, providers throughout the world.
Wow. Have you used it yourself? Did you need to?
I didn't. I don't have any back issues.
Good. That's great.
Yep.
How long did it take for you to get the position of vice president?
I started in 2005 and I became vice president in 2014.
Wow. It's a journey, right?
It is. It is. Went from a floater to executive assistant to office manager and then into the vice president of operations.
Wow. It's wonderful. I'm going to read the viewers a bit about you before we go on.
Okay.
So Miss Terri is a proud Native American warrior, which is awesome, Athabascan Tlingit tribe from the Raven clan, and she's journeyed through the pain of child sexual abuse and utter fear of life after her mother abandoned her at the age of 11 on the streets of Albuquerque. Rediscovering her true path in life, one of joy and love, she learned to transcend the fear that the egoic mind keeps bringing to the forefront of our lives. Ms. Terri is now a practical soul and life coach. Her mission is to inspire others to overcome their limiting beliefs. Wow. May I ask how old you are or the range?
I am 52.
That's what I thought. I thought 50s. Wow. Where would you like to start?
Let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
Because I believe that we're all born very intuitive, very aware. We come knowing who we are, what our purpose is, and what it is that we want to accomplish here at our school. However, we come into our first unknown, which is our family. And our family can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing. Yeah. And for me, I had a mixture. I had a really good father and I had a really bad mother. And knowing and being aware, if you look at children, especially children under the age of 6, and you talk to them when they talk about their, that they saw this or they heard that, really they're talking about them and hearing the whispers of their soul and them communicating with whatever spiritual realm we all come in knowing that there is. And as we go through life, all of that gets squashed because us lovely parents who want to go in and form these children into mini me's or form them into good girls and good boys. And we squash who they authentically are, what they're meant to do and be in this world. The other thing that can happen, which is what happened to me, is that there's some horrible trauma that occurs. And when I was 11, my mother allowed 3 men to sexually abuse me so that she could get drugs. She was an alcoholic turned drug addict. And also in the process, she disappeared for 3 days. And when she showed up, she literally put my sister and I out on the streets of Albuquerque, New Mexico, 3,000 miles away from my dad, which was in Pennsylvania. And my dad had custody of us, thankful. We're very thankful for that. So I got us back to Pennsylvania, and I am getting off the airplane, and I say to my dad, I need therapy. I'm 11. This is in the early 80s. I shouldn't know what therapy is, number one. The fact that I was able to stay present and figure out ways to take care of us, my sister and I, she's 11 months younger than I am, while we were in New Mexico with my mother, to make sure that we had a way to get to the airport. I mean, I was able to do all these things that an 11-year-old is just not supposed to do. Or even if I was 16, the awareness that I had that everything was going to be okay was pretty astonishing. But I attribute this to I didn't lose who I authentically was yet. I still had awareness of certain things that were bigger than me. So I went into therapy, and I stayed in therapy until I graduated high school. It did not benefit me the way that current therapy does. And the main reason for that was they really didn't know what to do with me. I didn't tell anybody I was sexually abused for over a year. And even when I told my dad, I never told the therapist, but the therapist, I'm sure knew. But how do you bring that up? How do you bring that up to an 11, 12, 13-year-old? What happened to you? And I'm not going to say, well, this happened and that happened. But on top of that, I didn't have the language. An 11-year-old doesn't know now. Nowadays they may, but my 11-year-old did not know what sex was. I didn't understand what happened to me. I knew I didn't like it. I knew it hurt. And I knew that something must not be right because my mother was standing in the corner and watched while these 3 men abused me. So I go through therapy, and I understand a lot of psychology at this point. I understand that people want me to put a mask on so that they think I'm okay, whether I'm okay or not, because they want to believe that, I am okay, that I'm going to be okay. So I learned to wear that mask, and I learned to put on armor so that other people couldn't harm me. And when you have in your head that your mother didn't love you enough to protect you, and then who else on the planet's going to do that for you? Your mother is supposed to be that comfort and that caring place that you go when the world's falling apart. And I didn't have that. And my mother was the reason my world fell apart. So I get to go through high school, which was a very interesting time. It's because you have lots, just if you had a happy, normal childhood, teenage years are, strenuous as it is. For me, it was compounded because I just wanted to be left alone. So I wore my victimhood proudly. And if you and I were close, I would let you know that I had some trauma in my life because I had very significant triggers. So if you came up behind me and tapped me on the shoulder, I would come around with my fist ready to swing at you. So I didn't want to harm anybody. So I would communicate and wear my victimhood very proudly. I get to college, and first semester in college, I am talking to a guy. We have a class together, and he makes a comment that I get something out of being a victim. I like being a victim. And I got very angry because who are you to tell me anything about my victimhood? But it's something about how he said it to me. He wasn't being vindictive or mean or anything. He was really trying to get me to see something that I wasn't seeing in myself. So I sat with it. I journaled about it. And what I realized was I was getting something out of being the victim. When you're a victim, how do people treat you? Very differently. They're gentle with you. They're kinder to you. They don't want to trigger you. They walk on eggshells. My family certainly walked on eggshells with me. So I was getting something out of that when people don't know what to do, they just leave you alone, which was ultimately what I wanted. I wanted people to leave me alone. At 18 or 17, I'm figuring out that there has to be a better way to communicate this than being proud I'm a victim. So I did a major mindset shift. And this was the first of many, but this was the most significant one. I went from being a victim to becoming a survivor. And that mindset shift did two things. The first thing it did was it now made me responsible for my life moving forward, which meant that I couldn't blame my choices, good or bad choices, on my trauma. I couldn't blame my mother. I couldn't blame the 3 men who raped me. I was taking responsibility and control of my present and future. The second thing that occurred that I didn't realize was going to happen was it was very empowering to now understand that, oh, I made this bad choice or I made this good choice. It had nothing to do with the past. So it's very empowering when you become a survivor and you know that you're taking control over the course of your life moving forward.
Wow. I really am just absorbing it all. And the first thing that comes to mind is there's people like us who go through these extreme traumatic events, that odd things, right? That people would never think that somebody would do. Why would someone do that? Or it doesn't make, that practical, the word I was using, that logical sense why someone who has common sense would do an act like that. And then there's, so there's people like us, and then there's other people who have not gone through these tragedies. And I believe that's why we resonate and people have experienced the pain resonate more. Do you agree with that? That people who have been through similar, life experiences resonate more with one another than, someone who has not, let's say they had more of an easy life compared to someone who has more hardships. What are your thoughts on that?
I do. I believe that when it comes right down to it, what I'm doing now, the work I'm doing now, is so that I can help others who have gone through similar experiences as we have and help them get to the other side. I want to build a bridge so that they can go from being a victim to becoming a survivor much easier than I did. It took me 40 years to get to where I am. And that being the case, that doesn't have to take that long. Our egoic minds keep us stuck in the past. It keeps us attached to our pain. And it doesn't want us to give up and our fear, because our fear, according to the egoic mind, keeps us safe. If we're afraid of people, then we won't get hurt because we're not going to befriend them. We're not going to be in relationship with them. And we're not going to make authentic connections. But when we do that, the one thing that we harm more than anybody else is ourselves. Those authentic connections is what help heal us. Those authentic connections remind us that we are worthy. Because that is first and foremost, the thing that we suffer from is that we don't think we're worthy. If all this could happen to us, if people who are supposed to love us harm us, obviously we're not worthy of love and affection. Obviously there's something wrong with us. But the reality is that's not true. That's the egoic lie that we tell ourselves to keep us in a state of fear. And the longer we stay in that state of fear, we keep reliving the past. We keep attached to the past versus allowing us to let go and look at a different perspective of life, one from a place of love where we're looking at and saying, I am worthy. I am worthy of the self-care. I am worthy of putting up the personal boundaries so that others don't harm me. I'm worthy of the love for myself. I'm worthy of the self-confidence that I have within myself, and I'm worthy to make my dreams come true. And by turning away from fear and towards love is the only way we can do that.
Wow. Very well said. You inspire me. As
Well,
you
thank
speak,
you.
there's like a few thoughts coming to mind, and earlier you said what happened to you. So do you know of Oprah's new book?
Yes.
Yeah. So did you read it
I
or
haven't,
listen
no.
to it?
I haven't.
Yeah. And so, with what actually happened to you, do you believe, because like Les Brown says, for example, like things happen to you and also for you. So where are you with that? Do you feel like if this event, very tragic event that happened to you and you survived it, if it didn't, that you wouldn't do the work you do today? Like there would be,
Absolutely. I absolutely believe that whatever happens to us, we're to find the lesson in it for us. Okay. All of my experiences there has been for my soul growth, period. Wow. It's been for my soul growth. Good, bad, the ugly, and the beautiful have all happened for my soul growth. I am responsible to figure out what that is, what the lesson is, why this experience happened, and what I'm supposed to learn from it. And if I'm awake and aware to what's happening around me, and I listen, I get quiet, and I listen to the whispers of my soul, I will always find the answer. All the answers we ever seek is never outside of us. They're all within us. And we have to get quiet and go within to learn who we are and for us to allow our self-expression to become authentically ourselves. That child that was squished by the peer pressure and by conforming to society because the parents want them to be good girls and good boys, we all come to a place where even if we had a really, really good life, we don't want to wear the masks. We don't want to wear the armor. We don't want to conform. We want to be who we were authentically meant to be. That's what all the midlife crises are about. Whether you've had a really good life or a really bad life, all midlife crises are about finding out who we authentically are and realizing I hate how my life is, and then realizing, shit, I'm the one that put myself in this place. I made these decisions. And when we learn to take responsibility for the choices, good or bad, but we made choices. Now, for a lot of my choices up until I became a survivor were not necessarily choices that I was aware of. And what I mean by that is they were automatic reactions that my egoic mind used to keep me safe. But when we become survivors, when we become aware, when we come to the place where we're consciously making choices to move in a direction that we want to go in, then we have to take responsibility for the good and the bad choices we make. So if I quit my job and end up having financial issues because I did not plan accordingly, that's on me. I can't blame it on COVID. I'm the one that quit. So there's, we can't, choosing to blame anything outside of us for our choices is a lie of the ego. And it's something the ego uses to keep us stuck. And the ego uses, instead of saying, all right, I made this choice, it wasn't the right one. What am I supposed to learn from this?
Wow. When did you start studying about the ego?
I want to say that's been a long time journey, because even through therapy is when I learned about the egoic mind and understanding that the ego is there to protect us. And it does for people who have been through trauma like us, it does a really, really good job. It knows how to keep us safe. And part of the problem is that that ego that gets put into place after a trauma, especially if you were a child. As a child, we don't know that some of these defense mechanisms we're using actually are really, really harmful to us as we get older. They're just in place because they've always been in place. And it's understanding that, okay, we have to examine. When we become aware, we have to examine our thoughts and beliefs and our patterns of behavior to see if, where did this come from? Why do I believe I'm unworthy? Why? Well, my mother said I was. Okay, is that true? Well, obviously other people love me, so that must not be true. And I think I'm an okay person, so I don't think that's true. And it's going through and examining what our beliefs are, what our fears are, and determining, is this really true for us? And if we actually examine it, 99% of the limiting beliefs we have are absolutely not true. Somewhere along the way, our ego took it to use it to keep us in the same place that it wants us to be in, whatever safe cocoon it's trying to form. And the ego isn't about growth. It isn't about expansion. It doesn't want you to live your dreams, because if you step out of your comfort zone, it doesn't know what to expect. So it doesn't want you to do that. Wow. So it's about making sure that growth is uncomfortable. Let's sit with that for a second. Growth is uncomfortable. So when you are trying something new and it's a little scary, that's that discomfort. And that's normal. Be okay with it. Get used to that, because, and as you keep stepping out of your comfort zone, even though it may be a little scary, you've done it before. Oh, well, I've tried this before, so maybe this will be a little different, but I'm not jumping out of an airplane with a parachute for the first time. It's not that kind of scary. What you're talking about is, I'm going for a job interview, or those day-to-day things that we do. I decided I wanted to take a painting class. Those little things that move us out of our comfort zone also help us to expand and grow in other ways. When I took the painting class, it was really about tapping into something that I was told long ago, that I wasn't a good painter, but I like to paint. Mm-hmm. I don't care if I am not trying to be a Picasso. I just want to paint because I enjoy it. I like it. It helps my creativity flow. And what's interesting is, when I started taking painting classes, I let my creativity starting to come out. And then a couple of years later, I started writing again. And I started teaching again. And 2 more years later, I became pregnant with the book. The year I turned 50, I became pregnant with my book, Raven Transcending Fear. And it literally 9 months, I typed away. 9 months later, I had a rough draft of a book. And when you allow your authenticity to come through and your creativity to come out, it takes you in places that you never would have thought. And I had been asked for 30 years if I was writing my book. It wasn't just no, it was hell no. This, however, when I became pregnant with it, literally poured out of me. And it was something that I know was divinely inspired. It wasn't something that Terri decided she wanted to do, because I never wanted to do it.
Wow. You're such a beautiful person.
Thank you.
And you can tell, you're not what happened to you.
No.
I don't see that at all.
No.
It's very interesting, because I do know older women as well in my circle who do carry, experiences such as yours with them until, your age. And they are really struggling with their mindset to get to the other side. But you started your journey 40 years ago. You already knew, hey, I need therapy.
So I have a story to go along with that. I know somebody who is 20 years older than me, and she was raped in college. And to this day, the last time I spoke to her, she was still believed that her ego is what's keeping her safe. She still lives from a place of fear. And my heart breaks for her, because she's extremely intelligent. And yet she tried to argue with me about what the ego is meant to do. The ego is meant to protect you. Yes, it's meant to protect you. That's its job. But you're supposed to not stay and live from the egoic mind. You're supposed to keep moving up and keep expanding and move to living from your soul. And she never learned to do that. And it breaks my heart that she's still suffering. And it's been over 50 years since she was raped. So it's really about how we change and are willing to look at our perception. And sometimes, if we're not unwilling to say, maybe there's a different way for me to look at this. And she's unwilling. She's just unwilling. Yeah. And we have to be willing to see from a different perspective. And I think we all have a choice to wallow, and we can all wallow really, really well. We know how to wallow. Or we can say, okay, now what? And ultimately, that is a revelation I had in the past couple of years of really understanding that we spend so much time asking, why me? Why did this happen to me? Why am I unworthy? Why didn't she love me? We ask all these why me questions. And the why me keeps us stuck in the past. Trying to figure out the past does nothing for your present or your future. You are now depressed. Depression, my definition of depression is being fearful about the past and staying stuck there. And my definition of anxiety is being fearful of the future. And I've been on both sides. I went from being depressed for about 10 years to the exact opposite, and started having massive panic attacks and being always, because I realized staying stuck in the past wasn't doing me any good. So when I became a survivor, silly me, went from being depressed to being anxious. Because now, as a survivor, you're looking forward. You're not looking backwards, you're looking forward. And as you look forward, the ego wants you to be fearful of the future. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's around the next corner. Well, you have to get up and walk to the next corner and peek your head around and say, okay, it's okay. I want to go down that path. And being able to look at, it's not so much looking at fear in the eye. It's about, is this really something to be afraid of?
Wow.
Now, if I peek my head around the corner, the sun's shining over there. It's raining over here. Let me go that way. What do I have to lose? I'm going to get a little bit of sun. I'm not going to stay wet. You have to look at the different perspectives that life is bringing and has in front of you. And there's always different paths for us to take. And if we choose to see the negative, we're going to keep reliving the negative. If we choose to see the positive, we're on the right path. We're on the road to a place where we can actually completely heal and be whole. But to do that, you have to quit asking why me and start asking, now what? Now what are we going to do? Now what am I going to do to move towards my dreams? Now what am I going to think about each morning when I get up? Am I going to think positive thoughts? Am I going to decide that I'm moving towards my dreams? Am I deciding that I am worthy of the self-care and self-love that I deserve? We have to start with ourselves, and working on ourselves and understanding that we are worthy is the first step.
Wow. You're a brilliant woman. Your husband is so lucky.
Thank you.
Would you ever do a TED Talk, or have you ever?
I'd be happy to do a TED Talk.
Wow. You definitely should. I highly recommend it for you.
Well, thank you.
I want to ask you, so have you been in therapy, all of the long term?
Nope. Nope. When I graduated high school, I stopped the therapy.
Wow.
So, majority of my healing process I did on my own or with loved ones, encouraging me and helping me. And really and truly, I had a friend of mine who read my book, Raven Transcending Fear, saying it's a love letter to my husband. Because for me, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, safety is number 2. And after the trauma, I never felt safe again. I just didn't. And that fear that everything bad could happen, would happen, stay with me for a very, very long time. And when I met my current husband, I didn't understand what I was feeling. And I wasn't quite sure what it was. We did a lot of talking, and it dawned on me, oh, I don't feel afraid when I'm with him. Wow. And it was the first time since I was 11, that I felt safe. So for me, feeling safe was strange. And it wasn't that when I was, a teenager at home that I didn't have some sort of safety, but that deep internal, I'm safe here, didn't happen for me. when I married my husband and had that, it allowed the next level of Maslow's hierarchy needs to start working. And you can't climb through the hierarchy of needs without that safety. And so for me, he absolutely provided me that foundation that I needed to feel safe so that I could start growing and expanding and exploring and going on the healing journey.
Wow. See, I definitely believe in love.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm glad that our doors, like for me as well, not to shut your doors, but keep your heart open. That's very important because, you can become better or bitter. And for you, I find, of course, you're very deserving of that. And, a lot of the time, people who do, like us, who do go through such events, we do end up having a great life with great people.
Absolutely.
Like we get blessed because like the worst is already over. Like
Correct.
I don't, for me, it was my abortion last year and, my circumstance and, to make that decision to do that, it's like the worst, that's the worst thing that, that can happen to a woman. As for me, for my personal situation during that time. And it's like, it changed my whole life. That's why I do what I do now, to share the stories. And I just find it to be, for example, like in countries such as India or possibly elsewhere, when women go through what you go through, either their family kills them or they go and commit suicide themselves because they're not able to live with that shame in those small villages. So I feel like even in those situations, they say, not to compare traumas, but it's the fact that you survived, that, you were more blessed that you're not in that environment where it's shaming you constantly that, you have to go kill yourself. So were you ever suicidal? Like, did you suffer with that?
I did. During my high school years, I absolutely would have said I was suicidal. My dad was very cognizant of certain things about me. And I had gone through, all the way up to the psychiatrist who wanted to drug me. My dad didn't want me drugged.
Good.
And so I didn't. I was never on medications up until I started having the panic attacks. And then I was not the daily, but when I started having a panic attack, I would take a Xanax. And that was more because I had 3 episodes where I had a panic attack, and the way I handled it was I held my breath until I passed out. That is a really good way to stop a panic attack. And unless you, like I did 3 times, when you pass out, you fall. I wasn't like sitting down. I was standing up, having a full-on panic attack, would hold my breath, pass out, fall to the ground, hit my head. So 3rd time was the charm. I said, there has to be a better way to do this. And, that's when they prescribed the Xanax. When you have this attack, take this pill. And interestingly enough, never had another panic attack after that, after I got the medication. Never had to take the pill up until I think I was in my late 30s before I started having panic attacks again. It's just knowing that there's a way to stop it was what it was I needed, as well as figuring out why I was having the panic attacks. Why was I letting myself get myself all stirred up over things that were absolutely positively not worth getting upset about? So, so I was suicidal, then I went through the depression and the anxiety. The thing about shame that I'd like to address is that shame is something that other people put upon us. Yeah. And what I mean by that is I did nothing wrong. I had nothing to feel guilty about. Guilt is a tool that we can use to help us do better things in the future. Okay, so if we messed up and we feel guilty for our mistake, then in the future we can remember that and say, I'm going to do better. Shame is never something that we did. Okay, shame is about somebody else doing something to us, And for some reason, they try to make us feel that what happened to us that was their fault was our fault. And that's where that shame comes in. And then the second aspect of that is they say, don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. And when you're told that as a small child, and especially if there's a threat, if you tell anybody, bad things are going to happen, then there's another reason why there's shame, because we're quiet. It's a secret. And one of the things that I really try to get people to walk through is, you didn't do anything wrong, so there's nothing to be ashamed of. Number one. Number two, staying silent is allowing the person who harmed you not to take responsibility. Staying silent means that you continue to suffer and that other person is walking around without any, my mother, although there's a part of me that hopes that there was some suffering on her part because she was a mother and I was her child. Right. But the reality is I suffered way longer than my mother ever did. She went on, lived her life, got married, had her life. But, she maintained, she was an alcoholic. She used drugs. So it's not that she ever got sober. That was never in the cards for her. But, she went on. I spent time in suffering. I was the one that, allowed all of this angst to continue to cause more and more problems and issues within me. Yeah. And because for a lot of people, that shame, the moment you start talking to somebody, and it doesn't mean that you have to tell the whole world. You don't have to write a book. All you have to do is tell one person, somebody you trust. And the moment you release that is an amazing feeling that floods your body like, oh, I can breathe.
I remember it. It was last year for me. I was going to take that to the grave. It's so great. I felt liberated. Like I was laughing and happy. Like I felt like no burden and I felt free. Like I didn't carry any more secrets. Like I have nothing to hide. You can't do anything to me. Wow.
Exactly. And that feeling many, many people don't ever have because they keep that secret. They keep it inside. And it's making those authentic connections, making that authentic communication with others that allows us to do two things. One, it proves to our ego that not everybody's out to hurt us, number one. And number two, it shows us that other people do care about where we are. They don't have to be on the same journey as us, but they care. They authentically care about how we feel and how we're doing. And if it's only in that moment and if you and I never speak to one another again, you know that I've touched your heart and that I care about what happened to you. And I know you care about what happened to me. And that's where that authentic connection comes in. Those are those vital connections that help us in the healing process.
Wow. There's so much wisdom in you.
Thank you.
So did you ever have kids yourself?
I did.
Wow.
I have, and interestingly enough, I knew I was, after the trauma, when I was about 16, I had a vision that I was not going to have a daughter. And I was the end of the generational pattern that had occurred for my mother was raped, her mother was raped, and there's a generational pattern there. I knew it was stopping with me. I knew that my line was ending. So I had a son. And interestingly enough, I found out I was pregnant and I was like, shoot, I have to figure out how to heal because I knew I still wasn't where I needed to be. And I knew I was codependent. So codependent no more. And I worked through the workbook, read the book, worked through the workbook. It must have taken me more than 9 months because my son wasn't born until he was 10 months gestation. So I could complete the work when he was born. And
wow.
yeah. And through that process, when he was born, there were some complications and they whisked him away. and had to deal with me. My placenta didn't let loose, and there was all kinds of complications. So I didn't bond with my son the way Dr. Spock tells you to bond with your child. I didn't see him for 6 hours after he was born. And then because I had Dr. Spock in my head, ladies, don't read Dr. Spock if you're pregnant. Don't do it. I never felt I bonded with my son. And I carried this for 18 years, this burden that, I felt disconnected from him, that maybe I didn't love him the way I was supposed to. And he's 18 and he's getting ready to go off into the Army. And I have this conversation with him. And I asked him, did you feel loved? And his response to me was, Mom, you loved me too much. So the angst that I had felt for 18 years, he never felt. So that was very reaffirming to me. He's going to be 30 this year.
Very 18 to 30.
Yeah. Very reaffirming to me that I did what I needed to do as a parent, because also if I didn't have a good example for a mother. So how was I going to model this? How was I going to have those, be able to mother him in a way that is healthy? So obviously he says I did a good job. So yay on that end. But we all have those things that, I knew I was codependent. I needed to overcome that. There are things that as we take this healing journey, we come across that this is new. What is this? I need, and for me, a lot of people talk about not wanting to forgive others for the harms they done. I had to forgive my mother. And forgiveness is about saying, I love me more than I hate my mother, or I care. I'm more important to me than my mother is to me, and holding on to that anger. Because if I don't forgive, I stay trapped in that anger and that hate and the negativity versus letting it go. Forgiveness is never about the other person. It's always about us. It's always our willingness to release the attachment, to say it could be any better, or that a lot of people get hung up on the fact that they think their forgiveness means that they're exonerating the other person. That's not it. And my mother never took responsibility for what she did. Not that I ever expected her to. But the reality is I needed to have the release. Forgiveness was about me releasing my negativity to her, not so much saying what she did was okay, because what she did wasn't okay.
Wow. So you did connect with her again about that.
So my mother and I did not have a healthy relationship ever. After we got back from New Mexico, I did not see my mother until my wedding day. And when my first husband and I got married, I am the eternal optimist. I believed up until my mother died that we would reconcile. So because I'm the eternal optimist, I didn't want the idea that we would reconcile someday and that her not be at my wedding. So I invited her. And surprisingly, she showed up. I didn't think she would, but she did. And so I saw her. That was the first time I saw her since the trauma occurred. So that was 10 years later. And then I didn't see her again until my son was 18 months old. My sister and her 10-month-old daughter were driving to New Mexico through Georgia. They stopped in to visit me. And I thought it was crazy that she was going to drive across country with a 10-month-old baby. So I went with her with my 18-month-old baby. And with the understanding that she was not to tell my mother I was coming. Because my mother supposedly was sober. And I wanted her to meet her grandson sober. So we get there, and she stayed sober for about 36 hours. And she started drinking, and my son and I left. But so she got to meet her grandson once. And then in 1996, she made a pilgrimage back to Alaska, which is where she originally from. after 40 years of being away. And I went with her. I flew, met her up there in Alaska, spent a couple of days visiting, and then I flew back to Georgia. That was the last time I saw my mother. I had spoken to her sporadically in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then in 2005, she was hospitalized. And I don't understand this. She had me as the person to handle things if she was unconscious. And my sister calls me to say, Mom's in the hospital. They say she's dying. Please don't let her die, is what my sister's telling me, because she knows that I have all this negativity towards my mother. And I said, well, I don't want her to die. I'm not going to do anything that allows her to die. So I get on the phone and we're going through, she had tuberculosis and dealing with ways to treatment and everything. So she recovers and she's in the hospital for almost 3 full months. So by the time she gets out of the hospital, she's completely sober. There's no alcohol, no nicotine. There's nothing in her system. And she's going to go visit my sister in Pennsylvania. And I tell her, I'm talking to doctors. And finally they said, she wants to talk to you. Are you willing to talk to her? So I talked to her one time. And I told her, if you stay sober and you get to Pennsylvania, I will come with Josh, my son, and visit. And she said, okay. She gets to my sister's house. And the day before I'm supposed to go up there, she starts drinking. And so I never saw her again.
Just, there's that saying, some people never change. That's what comes to mind. And we can't change anyone. It's just, do you believe it's just what it's destined to be? That's their, their journey.
Yes, I think we all have our own journeys, and we can help influence somebody, but we absolutely can't do anything more than influence. And they have to make their own choices. They have to make their own decisions, and they have to do their own healing journey. And I don't know. There's a part of me, because I spent years where my mother, when we, one of the first boundaries I had to put in place was she couldn't call if she was drunk, because when she was drunk, she was mean and nasty and blamed me for everything. So I was the reason she drank. I was the reason my dad left her, when the reality was she left my dad. So all these things that she would yell at me when she was drunk. So there's a part of me that, since she said it so many times, especially when I was 12, 13, 14, 15, that I was the reason she drank. Later in life, the idea of me coming to visit would cause her to drink. So am I the reason that she was drinking? Or is it that she felt guilty and she couldn't handle her emotions, so she covered it up? Wow. So there's 2 ways to look at that. I'm at fault, but the reality is I am not the person that put the alcohol in her mouth. I'm not the person that put the drugs in her arm. I'm not that person. She made those choices. Why she made those choices is in her own head, not mine. I did nothing outwardly to cause any of that. And that's where we get stuck, especially if we're still in a relationship with the person that caused our trauma. And for a lot of people, sadly to say, they are, because their families are a part of who caused them. I don't want to say that it's a blessing if you have had a stranger harm you, but it's very different than if you had family harm you, because it's that family connection that I spent years trying to understand. Honor thy mother and thy father. Well, honoring my mother meant I had to talk to her, didn't it? Well, no. Finally, somebody told me honoring doesn't mean they're allowed to hurt you. Ooh, that's really important to know. So if I can honor them as long as they don't hurt me. The moment they hurt me, I can put up a personal boundary and say, this isn't going to happen. I can hang up the phone. I can go ahead and say, Mom, I'm not going to talk to you if you're drunk. And if you're drunk, I'm going to hang up the phone. And if she calls and she's not drunk, I'll talk to her. If she calls and she's drunk, Mom, you've been drinking. I'm not talking to you. Hang up the phone, unplug it from the wall. And that's what I did. That was the first and hardest personal boundary I ever had to set in my life. Wow. And I unplugged the phone from the wall, went to the floor crying. And what was playing in my head was honor thy mother and thy father, honor thy mother and thy father. And I was just trying to be safe, because now I'm married with children, and me having an emotional breakdown isn't healthy for them. When there's nothing that they could do to change what occurred, I had to start taking responsibility for my responses to my mother. I wasn't reacting anymore. And there's a distinction between reacting and responding. You react from a place of fear. That's what your ego does. It's reacting. It's an automatic thing. You don't even think about it. Responding, however, means that we've paused, maybe taken a deep breath, and thought, allowed our soul to whisper what we're supposed to do.
Wow.
And then you respond, and you allow yourself to respond from a place of love. And that is the distinction that I have concerning reacting and responding. And I am conscious and aware that I want to respond to life from a place of love, not react to it out of a place of fear.
Wow. I needed this today.
Good.
I align with you so well, and everything you're saying, and those whispers, or those bonds, those soul bonds. When I was pregnant with my twins, I knew they weren't here to stay. Like I felt a connection that they knew that they were going to go, that the decision I had already made. I don't know if in spirituality with Sadhguru. Do you know of him?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay. So Sadhguru, he's a yogi mystic in India, and he has his Isha Foundation. But there's a video where he shares that about, I believe it's 12 weeks, the child knows if a spirit is right for the body, if the soul is right match for the body, if it needs to stay or go. So that's what's believed, in ancient teachings.
Mm-hmm.
But I found that to be very appropriate, and that the soul will come back to you like when it's the right time. Do you believe in that?
I do. I think that we all have those soul contracts with people, mm-hmm. and that whether we're conscious of it or not, that we do have these contracts and these agreements with people, and they come into our lives, and not everybody's supposed to stay. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that the ego gets attached to people, gets attached to things, gets attached to places. And the reality is we're only here for a short period of time, and we're here to learn. We're not here to make the most amount of money. We're not here to, accumulate. We're here to learn and to serve. Whatever it is I learn, I am to serve by teaching others what I've learned, so that they don't have to go through the same process I did. I can be that bridge to help mm-hmm. someone overcome trauma, because I've been there, done that. I know exactly how they feel, what they're thinking. I know what the egoic mind is doing inside their heads, because mine did that. and I'm now on the other side, and I can see it, and I can point it out. Oh, this is what you're thinking, and this is why you're thinking it. And they're shocked and amazed. And I'm like, no, I've been there. I know what that is. I know the suffering that we cause ourselves, because all the suffering happens in here. Mm-hmm. All the suffering happens in here. And this is where we have to heal. And the only way to heal is to allow our heart to take control and whisper to us the things that we need to do to allow us to respond from a place of love, instead of reacting out of a place of fear.
Wow. So wonderful. You see me pausing after you're done each time, because, it's not always about, reacting fast and all those things, really taking your time to, what's your next thought. Mm-hmm. So when did you start helping other people?
I think I've always helped other people along the way. But I think that my focus really came into play when I moved to Woodstock. it's, the universe does things and literally plucked me out of everybody that I was with, except my husband, and moved us to another town where I had to make new friends. I had to find out new things. But because nobody knew me, I could be authentically me. I wasn't wearing a mask. I didn't have to be the most organized person in the room. I didn't have to go in and lead anybody. I could just be me. Now, I'm naturally a leader, and that seems to come through no matter where I go. But in Woodstock, I was able to discover how to meditate. In Woodstock, I found my creativity. In Woodstock, I found a book club that I was very active with. And through the book club, I started teaching again. And through that teaching came my book. So, I believe that for me, 2014 was the pivotal year that got me to a place where my authenticity bloomed. And who I am on my podcast, Soul Solution, who I am in front of you and your audience is exactly who I authentically am when all the cameras get turned off and it's just me and my husband.
Wow, I can see that. So where can people find you?
People can find me at terrikozlowski.com. My podcast is the soulsolutionspodcast.com, and my book is raventranscendingfear.com. And I'd be happy to give your audience a free blueprint to overcoming their fears and limiting beliefs. I'll provide you with that link, and you can share it with your audience. And it is the six major steps I went through to overcoming my fears and limiting beliefs.
Well, I will be using that as well. Hey, I'm 28, but I can use it now.
It is much better for you to take the bridge than to have to suffer. And, if there wasn't anybody, you had brought up Oprah Winfrey. So I'll share a quick story. Oprah Winfrey, when she came out on her show as being a child that was molested, she was the first person I ever heard of that was also molested like I was. Wow. And I thought, oh my gosh, there's somebody else. Up until that moment, I thoroughly believed I was alone on the planet.
Wow. When it's so common, right?
And now now it's very common, but in the 80s it wasn't.
Oh yeah.
And for me, that bond that I immediately had with Oprah was something that for me was extremely profound in understanding that I wasn't alone. And, the reality is 3 in 5 women are sexually assaulted before they're 18. And the sad statistics is that, I'm learning from my analytics that a lot of men who have been listening to my podcast have been sexually abused as a child, and they're just suffering in silence. So it's really, really, really sad to think that we have all this technology, we have all this progress, and yet in this one area, we're still not making the progress we need to make.
It's very true. Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that. This is the most beautiful talk I've ever had.
Well, thank you.
I've had a lot of guests, but I've never had such a well-spoken guest who really is on the other side, and you can tell, you're the first person that, that's been on the show from what I can recall.
Well, thank you.
Tell your story. It's really a journey. You really took us through a journey. The arrangement of it was just so beautiful.
Well, thank you. And we're just having a conversation, so it's not like
and this is how you speak.
Yes.
It's so nice.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for your time. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. This was truly just beautiful. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Have a great day.
Yes, I'm going to talk to you more.
Okay.
Thank you.